Good
Hey.
morning, Brittany.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Well, it's nice to see you again. I did have a chance to complete the data display, and I emailed it to you so that you could have a chance to look at it ahead of time so that we can talk a little bit more about the data rather than me having to kind of go through and explain it all.
Awesome.
But I just wanted to just kind of run through and say a couple of things before we begin. Um, I did come into your world history class.
Mhm.
You were teaching about the triangular slave trade. And our focus question for me coming in on the 6th was, am I asking enough questions of the students during a lecture to keep them engaged? And am I allowing for enough wait time after asking the questions before getting responses?
Okay.
And then I just tracked the number of questions, the think time, which is approximate, and then I marked the student response with an S and then the teacher response with an S
Okay.
for the questions.
Awesome.
Okay. So did you have a chance to look at the data?
I did.
Okay. So what were some thoughts that you had as you were looking at it?
Honestly, I was really surprised at how many questions I asked, and then how, like, I kept repeating what they were saying, and then how few seconds that I gave them to respond. Like, I think maybe I ask enough questions, but definitely the time limit there, like, it sounds like it's rapid fire, almost. Like, it's just, like, constant questions and then not enough think time.
Okay, so how would you maybe go about still asking the questions that you like to ask, but with allowing more think time?
Probably I would pick a few of the questions because I think like there was like 20 or 30 of them. Oh gosh, there's 30. So I'd probably pick a few of the 30 that I asked and maybe like put it on a slide or something to slow it down so I know to slow it down and say you've got 10 seconds to think this out and then call on students as opposed to who out there has the answer.
Okay, so do you think then you could have like narrowed it down to just a few questions that were more specific to what you really wanted them to take away from the lesson, from the learning goal?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. 31 questions. That's a lot of them.
Okay. And what about the think time? How did you feel that was in terms of how much time you were allowing for them to process the question and think about the answer?
Honestly, I've always known that I don't give them enough think time, but it's like it's an in the moment kind of question. I don't ever really plan out my questions. They just kind of pop into my mind and I kind of ask a question. I was surprised at how short it was, but at the same time it didn't really shock me probably as much as it should have because I know that I don't give them enough time to think it through.
Okay, so you're saying that you'd like to see yourself give them more time
Absolutely.
to think about it.
Oh, yes.
And do you think that by having so many questions and giving little think time that also affects what students you're hearing from
Yes.
when you're getting responses?
Oh, I hear from the same 4 or 5 students every time.
Okay.
So I think what I really need to focus on is asking fewer questions and then figuring out a way to pick on different students because I don't really have the whole raise your hand and I'll call on you. I kind of just, the way my class, you saw the way my class runs, I kind of just let them shout out the answer. And if I hear the right one, I'm like, oh, hey, you over there, you said that. Good job. And I write it on the board and kind of move on. And I don't think that's really allowing them to comprehend the information because everybody's shouting out different answers and I'm just listening for the right one.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So once you hear that correct answer, then you're moving on to the next question.
Right. I mean, I repeat the answer that they say, but then I'm kind of like, oh, okay, he got it. Awesome. Now I'm moving on with what I'm doing, and usually it'll take a note, and then I'll ask another question.
Right. And you have 26 kids is what I counted in that class that I came into. And notice that also I added just in brackets for each of the questions the number of students that responded. So again, how do you feel about how much participation you're getting overall from all students?
Yeah, it's a little frustrating because I feel like I'm talking to the wall. I mean, or talking to those 2 or 3 students that are consistently answering, and I can tell you the 2 or 3 students that are consistently answering, and so
Yeah, I didn't know names, but I figured that you probably can pinpoint which of those students were the ones that
always
more
answer.
frequently were the ones answering.
Right.
Okay. And what about the quality of answers you were getting from those few kids that were the ones constantly answering? Just kind of looking at the answers themselves, and I did replay the audio so I could make sure I can give you as accurate as possible feedback. And I wrote down their answers and then
Right.
your answers, or you reinforcing the correct answer. So how do you feel about the quality of answers that you're getting from those kids who are responding?
I think they could be a little bit better, but I was kind of going through the lesson a little bit quick, so I was happy with how short the answers were. I didn't really want a long, drawn out response.
Okay.
But most days, I would much prefer longer, more well thought out responses. But for that lesson particularly, I kind of was just trying to get through it because we were supposed to take a test the next week, and it wasn't.
Yeah, and you did say that it was a shorter section. You were trying to just
Go through it so that we weren't spending more time. But I would prefer them to have better answers or be able to enunciate or not enunciate, but like
elaborate.
thank you.
Okay.
Elaborate more on the answers. Yes.
Okay. Because for the ones who were answering, as you can see, almost every time it matched your answer or you reinforcing the information. So they had the right answers to your questions. I just wasn't sure if you typically expect more from them to explain, give reason, or just sort of like justify their answers.
Usually no.
Okay.
I mean, I would like for them to, but usually we're just kind of moving through the material.
So how do you think you can kind of pull all this together? By limiting the number of questions, by allowing for more think time, and by getting deeper responses. Are there some thoughts that you have in how you can build on all that?
I think that if I slowed down my questioning and called on more students and gave them more time to wait, that they would come up with better answers and maybe understand the material a little bit better than... Because I know some students just wait on me to give them the answers. Like, I can tell that with some of my students, they wait on me to give the answers. So if I give them more time and randomly call on them as opposed to relying on those 2 to 3 students, I might get better discussions from my students about the material. And the class that you came into, they actually are more of a discussion class. They'll talk to me more, which I don't know if that's saying much because that means...
They asked a lot of great questions.
They did.
Yeah.
And so they like to talk more, and I would like for that to happen in all of my other classes where we talk a little bit more and I give notes a little bit less and they're understanding the material because they're working with it, not so much because I'm telling it to them.
Okay. And as far as getting more responses from more students, obviously there are some students who the answer just comes to them really quickly. There's other students who need a little more time thinking about it. And then you've got a handful of kids who actually will have an idea, they just can't say what they're thinking, and sometimes hearing someone else will help them come up with their own thoughts.
Right.
How do you think that you can restructure the way that they're responding right away to you? What can you do before taking maybe responses from the students? What can you allow for to happen prior to just taking an answer from a student?
So maybe implement more wait time, give them time to think more and formulate the answer, and then randomly call on them.
Okay. And have you ever used any type of a shoulder partner type of strategy where you actually let them first think about the answer, maybe share an answer with someone else nearby, and then collectively like come back together and
Yes.
share out?
I haven't done it in my world history classes. I do it in my AP Human Geography classes.
Because I know you've talked about using those types of strategies before, where you have the kids work in groups or in pairs and do that. So, just a thought was
allow them to talk it out with their partner and then come back to the group and talk it out as a group.
Yeah.
That makes perfect
And
sense.
maybe it'll help more kids feel more comfortable and confident to share,
Yes.
so that it's not the first time they're sharing with the whole class. They've already had a chance to share with someone else, and that person would have maybe corrected them or helped them process their own thinking
Right.
before sharing it out with everybody. Because I think most times we do have those kids who, you know, they know it, they don't mind just putting it out there, and you've got kids who question their own thoughts, their own answers, and they're just more nervous.
Right.
So they get left out of the conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let me see if there was anything else. So you've already mentioned maybe fewer questions, allowing for more time for students to think, and
Partner sharing.
Okay. And what about the correlation between you giving the answer to their answer each time you asked a question? Like, you asked a question, students called out answers. Once you heard that right answer, you repeated that answer. Is that something that you normally do to let the whole class know that that is the right answer?
Yes.
Okay. Because I noticed that
happens
pretty much
quite frequently.
Going on.
Yes.
Yeah, the whole time. And then at one point here, you asked a question. You did get a correct response. You then repeated that response, but then what do you see happen there after?
Oh, then I started talking.
Yeah.
Like, consistently started talking, because I knew that they would get the boat example, and I couldn't think of another question, honestly, to ask to get them to say carpenters and fishing and all of that. So I went in to explain the carpenters and the fishing industry and tobacco, as opposed to making them sit there and think about, oh, what other industries, other than shipbuilding could have grown because of the triangular trade.
Yeah. Because I think that when we expect to get quick answers from our students, we get very surface type of answers, and they don't have that time to think a little bit deeper into the question or into the topic.
Right.
To think of all those other things that connect that they probably do have some prior knowledge to. Okay. So how would you have maybe replanned this particular lesson? I know I know you wanted to go through it quickly,
right.
And you did do it a little differently than you probably normally do with the PowerPoint and everything like that. So let's think of how you may have done this a little bit differently if you had the opportunity to reteach it.
Honestly, if I had the time to redo it, I would pick 3 or 4 questions that I focused on, and then have the students maybe work in groups to get the answers to the questions, and then and talk it out, and then come back together and put them. Because I could have thought of 4 questions that go with each one of the categories that were on the board, and they could have answered those questions, and then we could have come back together and talked about it through then reinforcing it with notes or something.
And I did like your categories you had on a board, because I feel like you were going over it as you were teaching it and actually writing it, so they're not already seeing and copying information, but you guys were collectively coming up with the answers, and then you were writing it on the board.
Right.
But then I had another thought of how else could you have done that part of it in place of you writing on a board?
I could have had the students come up and do it. That would have been really cool. I didn't even think of that.
Because that would then
it would have been
them
up
more
and
engaged.
They would have been up and moving, and less me doing it and more of them doing it.
And some of them actually like to get up and write on the board.
Oh, yes.
So maybe that would have even gotten more of them to participate in answering questions if they knew that would mean they can come up to the board and write the answer.
Right.
Because let's be honest, they love writing
with
the markers on the board. So I noticed you were doing the writing, and I thought, well, I wonder, if the kids wouldn't enjoy doing the
Doing-
writing,
Right.
and then that way you're adding in more of those good teaching strategies. All right. Well, do you have any questions about the data itself or anything that I had in here?
No, not really.
I'm so glad that we recorded the lecture because I did have to go back several times to replay and get all the questions. I wanted to make sure that we had all that data in there.
Oh, I'm glad you recorded too.
I did bring you just a couple of things that I thought about as I was going through and organizing all this information that I collected. I have just this nice little handy dandy sort of collaborative learning
cool.
type of ideas and strategies. They're very short, to the point, and they're laid out for you and how you can go step by step to incorporate those into your teaching. So I thought maybe when thinking about questioning and think time and getting more responses from more students, that some of these types of collaborative strategies can allow for that.
Oh, well, cool. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe just, take some time, look over the different ideas, and maybe like pick one or two that you can try out, if
That's
that
awesome.
helps.
Thank you so much.
Of course. And then also, I had talked to you about an article that I read that just spoke to me so much. And it was like I was reading about myself in here, and I think most of us teachers would probably say the same thing. It's called Never Say Anything a Kid Can Say. It's an amazing reading. It basically is what it sounds like. The kids can say it. The kids can do it. The kids know it.
Right.
We just have to learn how to restructure our lessons and our ways of how we present information by allowing them to do more of that talking. And I just thought you would really like to read this. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff in there that spoke to me, and hopefully it'll do the same.
Awesome.
There's even a little section on questioning strategies here that I thought maybe you'd like to look over.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
I'm
welcome.
really excited. I can't
Okay.
wait to read it.
Well, thank you so much again, and I look forward to working with you sometime again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.